Let's turn to other stories. Former Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev has died at age 91. The Russian state media reported his demise Tuesday. Mr. Gorbachev, the last Soviet president, forged partnerships with Western powers to bring down the Iron Curtain and tear down the Berlin Wall, reunifying Germany. In their tributes, world leaders are hailing him for his strong leadership, contributions, and impact.
The last leader of the former Soviet Union from 1985 until 1991, Mikhail Gorbachev, has passed on at the age of 91. According to RIA University, the Central Clinical Hospital said he passed on Tuesday evening after a severe and prolonged illness. Mikhail Sergeyevich Gorbachev was born on March 2, 1931. He became a member of the Communist Party in 1952 and completed a law degree at Moscow University in 1955. In 1985, Gorbachev was elected as General Secretary, the de facto leader of the Soviet Union until 1990, when the Communist Party lost its monopoly of power over the political system. He was the head of the Social Democratic Party of Russia from 2001 until his resignation in 2004. Gorbachev was credited with introducing key political and economic reforms to the USSR and also helping in ending the Cold War. He had been in fallen health for some time. Spokesman of the Russian president, Dmitry Peskov, told RIA University that President Vladimir Putin expressed his condolences. Mr. Peskov also added that President Putin will send a message on Wednesday to Gorbachev's family and friends. Other world leaders have been paying tributes to Mikhail Gorbachev. According to U.S. President Joe Biden, he was a man of remarkable vision. President Biden went on to commend Gorbachev, who as a leader of the USSR, worked with President Reagan to reduce two countries' nuclear arsenals. To the people worldwide praying for an end to the nuclear arms race. President Biden also added that Gorbachev's reform led to a safer world and greater freedom for millions of people. President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, wrote on Twitter that Mikhail Gorbachev's role in ending the Cold War opened the way for a free Europe and the legacy will not be forgotten. Mikhail Gorbachev will be buried next to his wife, Raisha Titarenko, at the Novodevich Cemetery in Moscow.
And joining me now for a look at the life and times of Mikhail Gorbachev is a global affairs analyst, Kach Ononoju. Good to have you join us.
Thank you for having me.
Let me get your thought, because he's a really strong, that's Gorbachev, he's a really strong historical figure, not just in Russia, but also in the former Soviet Union. What was your thoughts when you heard about his death?
Well, when I heard about his death, what came to my mind is the current crisis in Ukraine. If Gorbachev was in charge, we would not be at war right now. And you also need to go back to understand who he is. The crisis in Ukraine stems from the sudden non-keeping of the assurances they were given to Mr. Gorbachev. Because at the end, when he agreed to remove Russian forces from Germany, the assurance was that the West would not move further. But then, every single assurance that he's been given has been broken. And that's why we said, if they had stayed in line with that assurance that they will respect the Monroe Doctrine, we would not be at war currently in the Ukraine. So Mr. Gorbachev, as historical as he is, will be greatly missed. And we think greatly about him in regards to the current crisis in Ukraine, because the crisis arose because people did no more keep to the promises that the West gave to Russia through Mr. Gorbachev. That's why we have crisis in Ukraine today.
He has, one would say, multi-legacies, if not like a bi-legacy, because how the West and the rest of the world see him, he's largely seen as a hero in the rest of the world. But in Russia, he was never forgiven for seeing to the end of the USSR. I just want you to speak to that in terms of having one legacy back at home and one in the West.
The failure of the USSR were mostly to do with the economics And that's because Russia could not economically carry on the requests and expectations of the other members of the USSR. So it just simply made sense for everybody to be on their own. And that's how it, so you really cannot blame Mr. Gorbachev, because what happened was the ultimate. And don't forget, the crisis in Afghanistan really weighed very heavy on the USSR spending. And so when Russia came back, the need was there to actually reassess. Why are we spending so much in trying to keep everybody on? Let everybody cater for themselves. And that's it. The economic reality sunk in. And as Russia tried to look after itself, every other person broke to look after themselves. And then we came to the end of the Soviet Union, and he got those assurances that the West, if he agreed to remove Russian troops from Germany, would not go further. Today, we are in a very different place, and everybody misses Mr. Gorbachev. But they also remember him as the figure that took and got the guarantees for President Reagan that the West will respect the Monroe Doctrine, which they did not keep, and that's why we are where we are today.
I agree. He was one of the, he's quite respected for seeing to the freedom of speech and the freedom of movement for Russians who were now able to have bilateral relations with other parts of the world. But what he dismantled, which is the USSR, is what Putin is now trying to build or restore.
That's not true.
Just hold on. Just hold on. Let me ask my question. He is what Putin is now trying to restore. I just want to speak to how you think Putin will remember him or mark his passing.
They remember him for his service as a patriot in the Politburo. But Putin is not trying to build back the USSR. No, that's not true. Putin simply wants people to respect the promises and the assurances they were given to Mr. Gorbachev. And those assurances are not being kept. So NATO's sudden intentions now to march to the extent of having bases and stationing weapons right on the border of Russia is the reasons for Putin's reaction to what's going on. So I really do not think he has intentions of bringing back the USSR. No, the USSR is a conglomeration of several nations.
Not, Mr. Nonuju, I don't think it's really about bringing back the USSR in that term as it was before. But again, we know that Russia is trying to extend its influence in that region and ensure that it is a dominant force in that region and not the West. And that's the point I'm trying to make. And that's one of the things that Gorbachev hasn't been forgiven for in Russia. And that's why I'm asking you how you think his passing will be marked, if he will get a state burial, because he's quite different. He's totally different from Putin. And if you think that Putin will give him the respect of a state burial.
Yes, Putin will give him the respect. Not just Putin. The USSR will give him the respect. Don't forget, he was the last leader of the USSR, not the last ruler of Russia. He was the last ruler of the USSR. So I believe that is a historical fact, which all those who remember him, and especially the Russians, who actually were the masters of the USSR, they will come, they will give that to him. Those are statute-mandated recognition that he gets as a former head of the Politburo. I do not see anybody going against him. Putin did not start this crisis because he wants to expand. No, he started it in reaction to NATO's intention to cancel all promises that were given to Mr. Gorbachev.
And he's been quite silent. He's not been one given to media chats. He's been quite silent, mostly all through the Ukraine war. Why do you think he sort of retracted or retreated from just the media, and speaking on issues that matter, especially the Ukraine war?
I believe he continued to speak, but you need to understand the fundamentals of the Ukraine war. It is seen outside Russia from the perspective of the propaganda of the West, but it's also seen inside Russia as a strategy to correct something they feel should not happen. Don't forget, Russia had agreed, and Ukraine had been part of Russia for years. Why do we want suddenly to drag Ukraine into the NATO alliance? It's not supposed to be there. Ukraine in 2010 passed a legislation to remain neutral. Why did they go back on that? Why did the comedian suddenly take his country into war? I don't think you need to blame the Russians for this crisis. And if you ask me, I will tell you to look at the words of the Pope. The Pope is right, and I'm with the Pope on that particular issue. I believe this particular carnage right now in Ukraine is avoidable. I blame NATO and the USS for this particular crisis. It's not a Russian problem.
Thank you so much for talking to us. As always, Global Affairs Analyst Catch Ononoju.
Thank you for having me.